I'm sorry, what? Is it a little hot in here? Welcome and welcome back, everybody. Tia here, and in today's video, well, you already know because you probably read the title, but in case you didn't, I set out on a mission to get those games off of my shelf of shame and onto the table, and ended up playing 50 new games over the course of the past 50 days. It's going to be a little bit of a marathon, but I want to share with you some of these games and my first impressions on them. So without further ado, let's get started. First up on the list is Spaceship, an 18-card wallet game from Button Shy Games. This is one that's been around for a while. I just hadn't picked it up because I'm not a huge fan of space games, but I really like the multi-use cards in this game. I'm really looking forward to trying the expansions once they're back in stock as well. The next one is another Button Shy game, Rove. This is a little bit of a sleeper. I don't think a lot of people were interested in it initially. They didn't do a Kickstarter for it, but it has become one of my most played games over the past 2 months, and one of my favorite ones to just whip out on a whim. So you are going to be arranging the different modules in order to complete different mission cards. It's a really interesting, unique spatial puzzle, and it's very quick and very to the point. Next up is a 2-player game from Moxie Games, and that is Radlands. This is a tactical card game where you're going to be playing different agents to damage your opponent's kind of base locations. The base locations are variable from game to game. The agents that you get are variable from game to game. They can be damaged. They can be put in a grid to form protection for other cards behind them in the columns. And one of the things I love about this game, well, 2 of the things I love. Number one, it's just the one box. I'm sure they'll release expansions for it at some point, but with a lot of these tactical card games, I find that there are just so many expansions. It becomes very overwhelming, very fast. So I'm glad that it's just a small compact box and there's a lot of versatility just in that base game. The second thing I love is that when you acquire cards, they can go straight into your hand and they can be discarded. So there's a little bit of multi-use for a particular resource or action, or they can be played into your tableau. Really cool, really tight little tactical 2-player game. And of course, one of my favorite themes and the aesthetic of this game, just beautiful. Next up is Juicy Fruits. This is a lighter family weight game. The thing that really shines for me about this game is this spatial puzzle slidiness that's happening here on the main board. So essentially you're going to be trying to collect resources to turn them in for new little sliders or baskets, or to create ice cream, or eventually later on buildings. As you fulfill orders around the board on your ships, they're going to leave, which opens up your island. As you slide your baskets, you'll get the resource shown on them, or the benefit shown on them, based on the number of places away that you're able to slide that basket. So it's really cool. Later on, you do have to make some tough decisions on whether you want to take up space on your island to place buildings, which will get you a lot of points. Overall, it's a lighter game than I typically like to play, but I just think this sliding mechanic and this puzzling together of your island was so unique, and I really love the theme and art. It just puts a smile on my face anytime I see it. Next one is one of Duke's games, and this is Cape May. The best way I can describe it is Monopoly for gamers. So in this game, you're going to be traversing down these different paths and avenues to build your various buildings. Some of the buildings will get you more points heavy scoring, while others will generate you income. There are different events to change up things from round to round, so that you don't just have a set strategy that you use from game to game, or even throughout the course of the game. That might change based on, what comes up and what your opponents are doing. It does rely heavily on area control because you'll be getting points based on majorities. Of this one I like a lot more than I thought. It was way, I wouldn't say lighter, but it was way less rules heavy than I thought it would be, and way quicker than I thought it would be. So that was a very pleasant surprise. Next up is one of the games that, I'm kicking myself because I wish I bought it sooner, and that is Black Angel. It was finally on sale. I remember when it came out, everybody's posting about it. I mean, obviously it's gorgeous. It's kind of like the older sibling to Selenia, which is a pick up and deliver resource management game. In Black Angel, you're going to have these robots which will help you get dice, and then you are going to place those dice into different locations around the ship. Based on the pit value and the location that you place it, you are going to be kind of semi-cooperatively maintaining the ship, which normally I don't like, but this one does it really well. You'll also be placing cards out onto a board to have missions, which will get you different benefits and different scoring. And in addition to that, speaking of slidey puzzles, you'll be operating your main console, where you'll be slotting in different technologies that will kind of push each other throughout the game and score you points. You're trying to line up certain colors or certain benefits together in order to maximize what you can do on your turn. Just so many cool little things with this game. It is a little bit much upfront to learn and read, but once you have an idea of what everything is, I think it works together really well. This is one that just overall, it's become one of my instant favorite games of right now, and it'll probably be in a solid top spot for a while to come. Next up is Let's Make a Bus Route. This is a game that I had been looking for a very long time. I'm so grateful that Duke found a copy and gifted it to me. This is a flip and fill style game, but unlike many flip and fill roll and write style games that feel very solitary, here you are working on a central map board to create your bus routes. And where they line up with other players will give you negative points, so you really have to be aware of what other people are going for. There are definitely some fun combos that you can unlock. It's a very quick game as well, which I enjoy. There's going to be a reprint, but instead of using markers, they have little wooden blocks. I'm not sure how fiddly that will be, so I'm really glad that I got a copy of this one. Next one is another one of Duke's games, Shelfie Stacker from designer Shem Phillips. The flavor is that you're drafting dice, and these dice represent board games that we will stacking into your shelf. I really like the idea of having the simultaneous action selection. The card value will determine what order the draft will happen in, but each card also has a unique ability. I will say that this game was a little light for me. It felt slightly underwhelming, but I think that the theme could really appeal to some people. Obviously, duh, if you enjoy board games, and arranging your shelf could definitely be a really fun one to whip out. But for me, it wasn't necessarily one of my favorite. Next up is Hibachi. This is a reskin and reprint from Grail Games of an original game, Sanfrenino, something like that. But you're going to be tossing these little poker chips out onto a central mat to get actions and get different ingredients, which you will then use to fill recipes. It's a really cool game because the poker chips also have numbers on them, which kind of like have bidding. So based on like the values that you throw and where they land, some different things will resolve and happen. Overall, it's a really quick and to the point game. I have to give a shout out that the paper money in this game is amazing. It's got like a plasticky finish, so it's very durable. And I know a lot of people are like on paper money in games, but I really enjoy paper money as long as it's not gonna like disintegrate in my hands. So I don't know, that was just like one little thing about this I love. I also got the hot and spicy expansion, which has unique player powers, plays up to 5. Just a super interesting and unique dexterity game with some surprisingly strategic elements, but it is very quick and very to the point. Next up is Botanic. This is one of my new favorite 2-player games. So you're going to be arranging tiles that you draft off of a center board and placing them to create your little mechanical botanical garden. And based on the color adjacency as well as where your flowers are placed, you will score different amounts of points. One of the things that I love about this game, as I've said many times here on the channel, is I love the idea of you take something and you play it, but you don't necessarily get it right away. So you have to plan ahead. And in this game, you're going to be placing tiles onto the board, but you don't get them until the tile becomes unlocked, meaning that it doesn't match the central tile in either color or shape. So I thought that was a really cool implementation of this. It's definitely become one of my top 2-player games right now. Next up is Set a Watch Swords of the Coin. Man, I love Set a Watch, and this just took everything I love about Set a Watch and made it even better just by adding these little coins and items. I really love the new characters as well. It's cool to me how each character has such a different feel and has so many unique abilities that you can swap out from play to play. I'm really looking forward to trying the Outriders expansion as well and combining both of the base sets together. This is one that does play to 4, but I strongly prefer it at 1 and have been enjoying it solo. This is Glow, a newer game from Luna Imports. This is one that as soon as I saw it, I knew I had to try it, even if the gameplay was a little underwhelming, which it kind of was. So this game starts off with a little bit of drafting where you're going to be taking a combination of a little character card as well as the dice above it. And based on each character card, you'll have a little engine going. You'll roll the dice, and based on the kinds of values shown, you'll be able to move around on the board in certain ways. It's not super heavy, not super crunchy or satisfying in that particular way, but I think for me, the aesthetic of this game and the overall experience is just really top tier. So it's one that I'm very glad that I have and am able to play. Next up is a game called The Magnificent from one of my favorite design duos, Elif Svensson and Christian A. Oatsby. This game has, so many amazing things. You're going to be essentially putting together a carnival show. You have these polyomino tiles that you're going to be placing onto your board. You're also going to be utilizing these tiles in different combinations and sets of them to put on your actual carnival shows. This is a picture of the main board, so you can kind of see there are a lot of different actions that you can do. You also have little workers that will get you benefits each round, but you're very limited on those. Have I mentioned that I really love dice worker placements? This one is so cool too, because not only are you using the dice to activate different cards, but each card also has a different scoring objective. So even if you want that particular die or that particular card for what it will do right now, it may not service you the best in the long run. There's a lot of planning ahead that you have to do with this game, and the game is very tight. It plays over 4 rounds, but you're super limited on your actions, just like the 4 cards that you have. It gives me the same feel as Bloody Inn, where it's like, oh, but if I just had one more action, then I can make it so perfect. So it's super tight. That might not be for everybody, but I crave that in a game. It's so, sorry. Next is Dollars to Donuts. This is a tiling game where you're going to be collecting donuts and trading them in to feed different customers. This one for me, the gameplay was so-so. The aesthetic and production is great, but overall, I just felt it to be a little bit samey. The tile puzzling together wasn't super unique, since you have like mainly these main pieces and then you have the square chits that you can place in as well. This is a great family weight game. I mean, if you like donuts, awesome. It does have very lovely art, but this was not my favorite in terms of the gameplay. And next up was one of the biggest disappointments, and that is Deep Space D6 Armada. I've already talked about this in a video, but even though I dearly, dearly love the original Deep Space D6 solo game, this solo to 4-player experience was not for me. The randomness with the crew card draws, with the upgrade draws, with rolling dice to resolve missions, I mean, that part was actually pretty okay because there was some mitigation, but rolling dice to combat enemies, the order in which the different events come out, and the dependence on that for triggering the end of the game, it just felt so unresolved, I think is the best way to describe it. I think definitely with a lot more playtesting and a lot more cleaning up, this could have been a very polished game, but as it stands right now, even with some of the suggested changes to the rules that were released, oh man, this was just a huge disappointment, unfortunately. But here we come to save the day. Oh my gosh, Prague Regni. I have to give a shout out. My friend Mackenzie over at Side Game LLC first brought this game up to my attention in a video we did together about delicious game components. He was talking about these eggs that they used to mix into mortar and concrete to build these bridges in Prague, and I'm like, what is he talking about? Ooh, I love this game. Thank you, Mackenzie. This is a picture of the actual egg bridge that you can construct. Ooh, action selection wheel, excuse me? Not only does the tile matter for which actions you can do, but the inside matters for a bonus action, and the outside matters because there's a cost associated of paying coins, nothing happening, or gaining points. Like, ooh, even just that alone. And the actions that you can do, man. Okay, this is literally called the Hunger Wall. I don't know why that gets me, but moving up on the Cathedral and Hunger Wall will give you different benefits, and they'll also give you a threshold for endgame scoring for some of the building tiles that you place out either on the board or into your tableau, as seen here. So the little red crosses and the blue fleur-de-lis that you can line up will score you points based on how many you have, but also how high up you are on the Hunger Wall and the Cathedral. So everything works together so well. This is a picture of the action board, which also has little wheels for tracking your resources that will unlock you different benefits once you get to a certain area. And there's different production costs at the bottom, and technology and scholarliness that will again unlock different endgame scoring working together with resources. You also have your technology wheel, which you can upgrade with different, more powerful tiles, as well as placing wall tiles around it to get different benefits. Oh, and here it is all together. Oh man. Ooh, I love the look of the game, even though it's not one of my like go-to aesthetics. And can I just okay, this is from the rulebook. Clever players will discover synergies between carefully timed actions and the rewards from constructing their civic projects. Hello. Like, that was one of the first lines I read. I'm like, I'm sorry, what is a little hot in here? I don't know, that just really got me going. And really, that kind of sums up the experience. It's just, it's so well designed and everything works so well together. There's so many amazing decisions to be had. It has solo play as well, which I'm very excited to delve into once I have some personal time to myself. But yeah, if you're into heavier Euro style games, this is like, I don't know if it's my favorite. Like, I want to say it might be my favorite. That might just be like recency bias or whatever it's called. But Prague Regni, I mean, man, Hunger Wall, Egg Bridge, all those things, just spectacular. Next up is one of Duke's games called Deus. This is one that's been around for a while. You're going to be constructing a tableau of cards in order to erect different pieces onto a main map. So there's a little bit of route building. There's a little bit of kind of majorities that you'll be going for in terms of taking down barbarians to score points. The thing that I love about this game is really the card play, because the cards that you acquire, you'll either play to your tableau or you will discard, utilizing the suit of one of the cards and the amount of cards you discard in order to pump up your action. So I just thought that that was a really cool game, and it really really surprised me how much I enjoyed this one. Next up is another of Duke's, and this is Cubitos. This is a unique dice bag building racing game, so it's a very unique combination of things. This one wasn't necessarily my favorite, but there is a lot of variety in just the base game box. I would imagine, again, this would be an easy one to make expansions for. Racing is not necessarily my thing. I do love unique dice and bag building, but this one for me was so-so, although I think it might be a favorite for some people who are more into that kind of style of game. Next up is Arkham Noir. This one was very surprising. I had heard mixed reviews about it, put off trying it for a really long time, and I have to give a shout out again. My friend Joshua over on Instagram was the one who convinced me to pull the trigger on it, and I did, and I'm so glad I did. I was like so close to canceling my order, but I'm glad that I did not. So essentially you're going to be playing cards to these cases that are open, and once you collect enough of a particular set, you'll turn them in. Once you complete so many cases, then you'll win the game. I love the fact that there's a really nice reference on all the cards, and you use the cards to create the game board, essentially. I thought that was just really clever and a great way to kind of remind you of what you're going through, especially as you're learning the game. There is quite a bit of iconography, but it did make sense with the theme and with those references. It's like hard to go wrong there. I did end up getting Arkham Noir and Case 1 and Case 2, which adds a little bit of flavor. I'm really glad to have both of them. This is definitely going to be one that I'm probably going to try to collect everything for, although the collector's cases are very hard to find. But this one definitely surprised me, and thank you again, Joshua, for convincing me to pull the trigger on it. And speaking of thanks, my friend Marcus over on Instagram recommended this game to me. It's called Crystal Palace, and this was not a game that was on my radar whatsoever, but my love of dice worker placement, I mean, come on, had to do it. So essentially it is a dice worker placement game, but at the beginning of each round, this is super cool. You're going to be setting the dice to the values that you want. So it's a little bit of bidding, and then you all simultaneously reveal those values and have to pay for your workers. Dice of higher values will get you better actions at different locations. You'll be able to block people out with certain values. So there's a little bit of, I don't know if bluffing is the right word, but where you have to anticipate what everybody else might set their dice to, and do I want to meet them and try to get there first? Do I want to exceed them to get the actions that I want, or do I want to play it safe and just do a lower action? Really cool how everything works together. I like the idea of getting technologies that you're inventing as well as the different inventors, and you can get like bonuses if you line them up, the inventions with the inventors who created them. So super interesting flavor to it. It's one that, again, if I hadn't been recommended, I don't know that I would have really heard of it, and if I did hear of it or see it on first glance, I probably would have passed. So thank you, Marcus, for the recommendation. Next up is a solo play game from Todd Sanders, and that is Mr. Cabbage Head's Garden. You're going to be creating a tableau of cards. You want to arrange them in certain ways, and these pesky little neighbors will be stealing vegetables out of your garden throughout the game. This is a really fun, quirky game. I love the art and the aesthetic. It's kind of old-timey, illustrative, children's book style art, or at least that's what it reminds me of. And this is just a really fun little quick pattern game. And then we have Ramen Ramen. I love ramen and I love card games, so I thought I'll give it a go. The gameplay was a little bit underwhelming. Essentially, you're putting different ingredients into different ramen pots, and once they exceed a threshold, you get those cards. Not my favorite gameplay, but overall, I'm glad I got to try it. Here we have Iki. This is a new edition of a classic game. The shining point of this game is that when you place out different market stalls in this Japanese marketplace, you'll have workers that will eventually upgrade and level up the more that time goes on, or the more that their stall gets utilized by other players. So the scoring conditions in this one really work nicely together. There is a little bit of a luck element where fires will happen throughout the game. So you can try to lock in a high bar on the fire protection scale, or you can play it fast and loose and just kind of work with the placement of your buildings in order to protect yourself in that way. So that's a cool element that changes it up a little bit, but I didn't find it to be too random. Overall, it was very strategic and a really solid worker placement game. And here we have Proving Grounds. This is from one of my favorite designers, King Klinko. This game got lukewarm reviews, and I finally thought, you know what, I'll pick it up and I'll try it just to see. And unfortunately, it wasn't the best. It reminded me too much of Fuse and Flatline, which are two of my all-time favorites. Speed games and two of my favorite games to play solo, where you're rolling dice, trying to get different combinations. This one just felt very samey, and it didn't feel like as the player I had a lot of agency in terms of mitigating luck and also where I'm placing my dice. So I think that's where it fell flat for me. And speaking of games that are too lucky with die rolls and didn't feel very engaging, that just felt very samey, this is Hostage Negotiator. Another one I wasn't sure I would like, but I got it for a great deal and I figured I would try it out. This one has such a unique, cool theme. I really wanted to like it. However, again, I didn't feel like I had a lot of agency over what was happening throughout the course of the game, and for that reason, it didn't feel immersive. Pick-a-Seal is a quick little speed game where you are going to be collecting different seals based on cards that have one difference from your main card. I don't know how many of these games I have that are speed like matching type games. Probably more than anybody needs in a collection, but the art of this one is just so cute and humorous, and it's like a genre that I have a weird love for, so I'm really glad to have this in my collection. I also have Pick a Polar Bear, which you can combine together to play Pick an Arctic Animal, so that just tickles me. And here we have another one of Duke's games. It's called Keyflower. This game really surprised me with how much I enjoy it. You're going to be placing workers of various colors out to bid on certain tiles and also to activate tiles. So one of the things that I like is that you can place your workers not only on your own board, but to your opponent's board as well to activate their actions, but you always have to one-up them and match the color of meeple that's already been placed. Even though you can use your opponent's board, your meeples will then go to the other players. So you have to be very careful about which tiles you want to activate versus which tiles you want to bid on versus which tiles you want to let your opponent have and just give them those meeples. Lots of really cool little decisions. It's a very straightforward game. It plays fairly quickly, at least at 2 it did, and this is one that, again, was really surprising how much I enjoyed it. Here we have Atlantis Rising. This game is absolutely gorgeous, but unfortunately is not one that I think I'll be keeping. It is a cooperative worker placement game with variable player powers. It plays up to 7 players, but it just felt very samey. The abilities of each player were fairly basic, and as you can see here, it shows these like mystic little pebbles that you can use to do all manner of things, and it felt kind of like a little bit of a shoe-in resource of like, you can use them to do this or this or this or this or mitigate all these different things that are happening. I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of games that are in the same vein of things where you're working together to combat some card draw that's happening and collect resources to build technologies like the Forbidden series that are lighter. I think they're more to the point. And there are games like this that are heavier that I typically lean towards preferring to play solo or with like 1 or 2 other people. This one for me was a weird middle ground that I don't think I will be keeping. I know there's an expansion that's going to be released. I can't foresee it adding enough or changing the base game enough to where I would want to keep this game in my collection. Next up, we have another one of Duke's games. It's called BC Bar. This is a really quick little card game where you're going to be playing cards, and based on where they are close to the entrance or the exit, they'll be taken in or booted out. Really quick to the point. I don't really like the art of this game or the look of it, but it's a pretty fun little simultaneous action selection game. And next we have Tokyo Jido Henbaiki from designer Jordan Draper. A lot of Jordan's games have this cool concept where you have a set of components and then a booklet of all the different ways they can be utilized. So for Jido Henbaiki, you have these drinks in these crates as well as different cards representing them and a vending machine. So some of the style games are more dexterity based, some are more puzzle based, some are kind of economic bluffing, bidding. Just so many cool possibilities. I have to say the production quality, it took forever to get all the little stickers on, but they look so cool. And this one just really tickles me. I love the variety that's provided, and none of the games, you know, take an immense amount of time. None of them are super involved, but I think this is just such a cool creative use of board gaming components and board game design. It's just one of the coolest games I have in my collection, I feel, and it's probably not for everybody, but for me, this like really excites me in terms of just board gaming and the hobby in general. Next up is Maki. This one is one that the theme didn't really appeal to me, but it is a really cool little worker placement game where you're sending out your troops to complete different missions and build routes, but you want to make sure that they're not going to be arrested by police or stopped by police on their way back to the safe house each round. This one didn't strike me super emotionally one way or another. I think it's very unique and very clever. I think it'll definitely take more plays and delving into some of the more in-depth missions for me to get a really good feel of this game. But overall, it's definitely a unique solo game. I don't own any other games quite like it, so I'm very glad that it's in my collection and that I have the opportunity to play it. Next up is one that's been on my shelf of shame for a really long time, and this is Winterborn. There's a little bit of deck building in this game. There's a little bit of puzzliness as you move your different units around the board. There are some unique powers that you'll get towards the end of the game called Winterborn powers, which I think really makes the game because you're playing through the 4 different seasons. Once you get to winter, all bets are off. This is very unique. I don't necessarily think it will be for everybody, but it fills a weird niche of resources management slash a little bit of deck building slash a little bit of puzzliness that I really enjoyed. I think it'll take a couple more plays to really get the hang of it and to get into it a bit more. And Three Sisters is one of the games that Duke backed on Kickstarter and arrived during this 50-day period. So this is a roll and write game, combos galore, you know, just crossing off boxes. The theme of this one was really cute. I like the idea of that the dice are rolled and placed out, so you're drafting them off the board, and then you'll get bonus actions at the end of each round, but also based on what's left on the board. Lots of combos for this one. It wasn't necessarily one that for me over other roll and writes really spoke highly, but if you like that gone shown clever type of like cascading triggering combos, this is a really fun one that's a little bit more in depth and has a more interesting theme. And next up is another Kickstarter that Duke backed. This is It's a Wonderful Kingdom. I'll just say it outright. I really prefer It's a Wonderful World over It's a Wonderful Kingdom, even though I love the theme of this more. One of the things I didn't really like are the fact that there are these calamity cards. So you're like, first of all, it's only a 2-player game as opposed to It's a Wonderful World, which plays up to like, you know, 1 million. You're going to be placing out cards either face up or face down, so there's a little bit of bluffing. I can see it being really cool for some people, but for me, I just liked the straight drafting in It's a Wonderful World a lot better. I felt like I had more control over things, and while I do enjoy some of those bluffing elements in games with hidden information, in this one, I didn't really appreciate it as much. Next up is Rococo Deluxe. I just thought, you know, this is a bigger box game, but I love the aesthetic. I love the theme. This game was way easier to get into than I thought it would be, just based on the box size. And this is a reprint with new artwork from Ian O'Toole. I just love the aesthetic of the game. And essentially you're collecting different sewing items and different cards in order to be able to kind of dress the guests of this grand ball. This game essentially was everything that I wanted Prêt-à-Porter to be. Unfortunately, that game really fell flat for me back in the day, so I'm very glad that I have Rococo. Next is another kind of like kid game called Bucket King 3D, where you're going to be playing cards, and as you go, it's a little bit of a dexterity element where you're going to have to remove buckets if you lose the bid, or kind of the war in different card numbers. This was just really fun and really quick and to the point. There's a little bit of strategy, a little bit of fun. It's just a cool collector's item. And here is Unsurmountable. We're back again to the Button Shy games. This is from designer Scott Alms, and in this game, you're going to be puzzling together to build a path up to the top of the mountain. I played the basic version of the first game. I'm really excited to try some of the harder modes, as well as some of the mini expansions that were provided, which I backed on Kickstarter. And then we have Batoku. Oh, speaking of new favorites that are here to stay, this is a dice worker placement game with a whole bunch of different tracks going on. And this game is a little hefty to get into, but not as bad as I think most people think it is. The iconography, how everything works together, the shapes even of the different components really lend themselves to kind of visually seeing, okay, this is how this slots in here, this is how this goes here. It looks like a lot to look at, but part of that is just because the art is so gorgeous. The iconography is fairly straightforward once you get a read, and I do appreciate the fact that each player has their own manual. So there are these little kodamas that you're going to be moving for different tracks. You're going to get buildings which you or other players can utilize at different locations based on the pip values of the dice that you place there, and the pip values of those dice will also help you cross over the river, help you get action points to move down your path. There's a tiny little bit of deck building with which cards you draft. Obviously, I really like the Uokami cards here. So overall, this is just a gorgeous game. It's a little heftier, and it's like a crossover of all the things I love about these hefty dice worker placement games, but also like some of my favorite aesthetics overall. Next is a small card game called High Society. Again, a reprint with some art from Medusa Dollmaker. This one I didn't think I would like as much as I did, because you have these different bidding cards or money cards that you'll be using to get different sets and different collections of cards that could be worth positive or negative points. It's super fast, like one of the quickest little bidding games that I own. And the cool thing is that if you spend the most money, you might have the best cards, but your friends will be like, oh, but you're actually like fake rich now, so you don't actually get to win, you lose outright. Susie Moosey is another small wallet game from Button Shy Games. This one I really love the aesthetic of, and I haven't tried the solo play yet, but I'm looking forward to getting into it. This is literally like a 4-minute game as you play over the 4 rounds of placing a card face up, placing a card face down, kind of similar to It's a Wonderful Kingdom, but in this game, because it's like just the main core of it and set collection, it worked a little bit better in this package for me. Time Trace is a trick-taking game where you can actually travel back to previous tricks and manipulate them. It sounds convoluted, but the theme and the idea of it really intrigued me. I think it came together pretty well in the package, although it's a little bit much to wrap your head around on a first play. And here is EO, one of the Matchbox collection games from Thundergriff Games. This is the one that I put off trying for the longest, and I'm kicking myself because it's my favorite out of the 5 that they've released. You are going to be playing weapon cards, and you'll target different enemies in one of the 4 locations around your grid. Cool thing is that during the last round, you're going to spend honor points of defeated warriors in order to buy new weapons. So you really have to be paying attention to what's happening from round to round. And I feel like from play to play, this really will vary up your strategy based on the order that the cards come out, which bosses come out. Just a super cool, quick and to the point little solo game. Next is Matryoshka. This is one that's been on my shelf for a really long time, probably the longest out of any of these games, and it is a negotiation game where you're collecting sets of cards. This is one that I know a lot of people were not in huge favor of. I didn't hear any high praise, but I really love the art, and again, I love card games. What can I say? I have a weakness for them. But this is one that I'm super kicking myself because it is one of the most unique and I don't know, again, recency bias, but it's like one of my favorite little card games. Basically, you have limited information about what people have. You're going to put a card out. Everybody will secretly put a card in for their bid, and then you'll choose one person after looking at all of them and swap with them. Now, each round, you'll score some of the cards in your hand. You're going to place them out into your tableau, but you don't necessarily always want to place your best cards that will score you the most points, because that gives everybody else information about which cards you might need later on in further rounds. So there's some really cool strategy happening in this game. And next is Vivid Memories. This game is deceivingly challenging. You are going to be drafting tiles off of memories, kind of like in a Splendor-esque style where you get 3 different ones or 2 of the same and placing them onto your board in order to weave together memories. The patterns that you create on your board are really interesting because you're not only trying to get certain groups together, but you're also trying to connect these core memories at the edges of your board. So this one really hurt my brain. Each memory tile, if you're like the last one to take the tile off, you get the memory tile as well, which will upgrade or change your action slightly. So there's that to take into account. This one felt a little short to me. I'm going to be honest. I like to have games that err on the side of brevity, but this one, I don't know if it was just because of the first play or just because it was hard for me to wrap my brain around how to get the points efficiently. Felt like they could have done with like one more round or one more little phase or something. So I'm curious to try it again. Next we have Thieves Market. This is one that's been on Duke's Shelf of Shame. This game really surprised me in how much I love it. You're going to roll dice and the first player will take as many dice as you want. You can then take from the central pool as many dice as you want, or you can steal from another player by placing one of the dice or components back in. So it's just a little set collection game, but that interaction is something that I haven't really seen in a game before, and it really excites me in this one. It's very straight to the point. The only thing is the iconography. I'm just gonna be honest, the iconography sucks in this game. Like, none of the things look like what they were supposed to do, and then when we look up the rules, it was contradictory to what it looked like on the card. But other than that, the actual gameplay itself was very exciting. And here we have a newer game that has been released called Corrosion. This is one of Duke's games. It's a little engine builder. We're literally building a little steam engine. Did I mention that I love kind of anything with an action selection / wheel mechanic? Very cool, because your cards will be out of rotation. Like, the higher value card you play, the longer it'll take to get it back into your hands. The different machine parts that you play will go into different slots, and they will trigger based on where that wheel is, or be ejected from your engine based on where that wheel is. Super cool mechanically, pretty straightforward again in terms of how it works together, but there's a lot of depth of strategy here to be explored. Muse is a more party style game where you are going to be laying out cards and trying to select the card that matches the clue given, but each clue is going to be limited based on a particular card. So like this, for example, name a non-fictional animal. My clue was hummingbird, and then the other players had to choose from one of these 6 cards. So this is a really quick, just light little game. Potemkin Empire is a bluffing game that I bought, I'm not gonna lie, bought solely based off of the cover art and the aesthetic of the game. Here you're gonna be buildings with the different interior cards that you get. You can either use them for actions or to construct buildings, and based on The text on the back of the card, the building will either be real or it will be fake. Each type of building will get you a different benefit that will help you towards scoring. On a first play, I didn't notice anything that was significantly broken, although reading through forums, there are some people that claim that there are things that are very broken. But I think overall, it's a very quick game and very fun experience. I think a lot of the balancing comes from how other players react to what you do. So it could be broken in that sense based on who you're playing with. There could be a lot of king making, a lot of targeting, but for what it is, just a light little bluffing game with a really cool aesthetic and really cool story. I think that this is thumbs up for me. And here we have mint delivery. For me, this one fell short. I also own Great Heartland Hauling Co., which is one of my favorite little pick up and deliver games. This one just felt like it didn't quite have enough going on. It could be fun to play with kids, but the cards around the map were very samey in terms of the transactions of mints for upgrading mints and then trading them in. And here is Ghost of Christmas, another game in this very specific niche genre that I now know is a need of mine, which is trick-taking games with a time traveling element. So this was really cool because you could play cards to different past, the present, the future, or even the beyond with a little mini expansion. And based on the card that was first played in that, that's going to be like the lead suit for that card that everybody has to follow. But based on who wins each trick, it will change the trump suit as you go along. It sounds a little confusing, but this one was super cool compared to some of their other similar size box games, which were mostly for kids. This one is definitely, I mean, you could play it with some kids that are very smart, but this is definitely more geared towards adults, even though the artwork doesn't necessarily look that way since it's very cartoony, very colorful. But this is one that I really ended up enjoying quite a lot. The only thing is that with the scoring, you're bidding on how many tricks you think you'll win. So the scoring can be very swingy, but the actual puzzle of putting together which cards to play and when was really, really satisfying. And here is a solo game called The Rat Catcher. Overall, I love the aesthetic. I love the theme of this game. I think the mechanics could be really cool. There is a lot of die rolling, which can feel very lucky, but there are some ways to mitigate that for sure. I think people's main complaint with this game is that it's fiddly, and it is definitely quite fiddly, but the components are so fun and cute to play with. Like, I almost didn't mind, other than I lost track of what I was doing a couple of times with like which rats move and when. The main thing that felt overwhelming about this game, which could be a positive or maybe not, we'll see, is the fact that you are constantly putting out new cards and the board is constantly evolving, sometimes after the player phase and also after the rats phase. So it was very overwhelming in that sense, which on one hand, in terms of managing the components, was not the most fun. In terms of how it made me feel emotionally, like I got some legit anxiety, which fits with the theme of this game, where you feel like there's just relentless waves of rats coming in over and over again. Like, it kind of gave me some Dark Souls type vibes from just the overall aesthetic and from that kind of relentless ongoing wave. It felt fun to try to hang in there for as long as I could. I ended up losing the game. I had 7 out of the 10 pieces of cheese I needed to collect, but it definitely, like, it crushed me, but in a way where I was like, ooh, I want to try that again. So it'll take me a couple more plays to get the hang of this one probably, and to see whether it will be staying in my collection or not. Next up is another one of Duke's games called Tiny Epic Dinos. This one placed kind of in the middle of the pack. I liked it more than I thought I would. I will say that. The dinosaur meeples are super cute. The one thing that kind of threw me off though was the fact that the character art and some of the dinosaur art looked like a really bad mobile app game. I don't know. I guess all of the games kind of have that aesthetic to them, or a lot of the Tiny Epic games do, but this one particularly kind of hit me in that weird spot. And to round things out, the 50th game we played is another one of Duke's called Embark. This is one of those smaller box TMG games. In this one, you're going to be secretly placing out your cubes, and based on the priority in turn order, you're going to be placing them onto ships to select actions that will go onto each of the main boards. Secretly programming and then revealing gives me a lot of anxiety, but in this one it worked pretty well. And overall, like, the different actions that you have from game to game with putting out different ships and the different boards was pretty fun and enjoyable. It wasn't necessarily my favorite game, but one of the things I will say is that the pink player cubes are like a dusty rose color and they just look like little cube hand pieces. I don't know, that just really got me. But that was the final game in this long marathon of games over the past 50 days. So there you have it, 50 new games in 50 days. Let me know in the comments down below what games you've gotten off of your shelf of shame recently, or are looking forward to getting to the table soon. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to subscribe down below and give it a like. It really does help out the channel. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye. spectacular. Just amazing. Beautiful.